Talk a bit about what these images meant for people who saw them, especially Haitian Americans who have been through so much trauma with the assassination of the president, the earthquake there, so many things that have happened to Haiti with the insecurity. What were people telling you about what these images meant to them?
As you mentioned, for African Americans, it immediately took them back to the slave patrols during the days of slavery. But for Haitians and Haitian Americans, especially here in South Florida, it was an example of the double standard that they have endured under U.S. immigration policy. Here in South Florida, in Miami in particular, we had wet foot, dry foot. That is the law that was enacted by the Clinton administration until the Obama administration got rid of it after 21 years, where Cuban migrants, when they arrived on U.S. soil, they were allowed to stay. And after 1 year and 1 day, they could apply for residency. But Haitians and other migrants who were caught at sea, they were returned to their country of origin. We also had Guantanamo Bay, where we had over 60,000 Haitians who were there, including 213 unaccompanied minors who were eventually returned back to Haiti. And of course, the Mariel boat lift. A lot of people forget, but there were also Haitians who arrived here in South Florida, and they too finally received some immigration benefit, but only after the activism of the community. So when I spoke to Haitian Americans, immigration advocates, that was what came to mind to them. That, once again, you were seeing the double standard in terms of Haitian immigrants. No matter, what was happening in their country, they were always perceived as economic migrants. And therefore, they were always, immediately returned back to Haiti, while other migrants who come seeking asylum are often allowed to at least go through the court system and make their case.
You were also at the border. You were in Mexico and in Texas. Why are migrants making these dangerous journeys? And what about what happened this week really reveals the U.S. strategy here? And also, I should note, the migrant camp at its peak was 14,000 Haitian migrants. Today, DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, said it was cleared out. But tell me a little bit about what you're hearing from migrants based on your reporting.
There's one word: desperation. If we take a step back, these are migrants who left Haiti after the 2010 earthquake. And if we remember, the U.S. was preparing for a migration crisis after January 12, 2010, when Port-au-Prince, the capital of Haiti, was nearly destroyed by a 7.0 earthquake and over 300,000 people were killed. But that crisis did not happen, at least not immediately. It was 2 years after we started to see Haitians fleeing to Brazil. And at the time, Brazil needed workers. They were preparing for the World Cup and for the Olympics. And then, as Brazil's economy started to turn, they started having their own issues with corruption. We started seeing migrants moving to Chile. And then in Haiti, in 1 year, in 2017, 1% of Haiti's population, which is 11.5 million, 100,000 Haitians migrated from Haiti to Chile. And then we started to see this migration, this 7,000-mile trek to the U.S. southern border with Mexico. I was there in Tijuana. I talked to migrants, and that's what you're seeing here again with this surge. DHS is saying that they were caught off guard, but earlier this year in February, I wrote about a surge of migrants on the border of Tijuana. A month ago, there were 3,000 migrants who were in a camp. In 2 weeks, that camp had about 3,000 people. So the fact that they were caught off guard by nearly 15,000 migrants, not all of whom were Haitians, but the majority were, is quite interesting. But when you talk to the migrants, they tell you in terms of the desperation and the fact that they did not want to go back to Haiti. What does it say? That this country today is far worse than it was in 2010, in 2012, and 2014, meaning in the last 11 years since that tragic earthquake, the country has not improved. It's gone downhill, and they just do not see a light for them. So today, as we've seen the U.S. continue to do these these deportation flights, and I think that there has been at least 21, it's very interesting to see what's going to happen to these migrants who have been returned.
A quick follow-up. What led to the resignation of Foote based on your reporting, Daniel Foote, the special envoy to Haiti, and where do things go next? Where is this going now that all of this has happened?
Well, I think, Daniel Foote says it in his letter. I mean, first and foremost, there was the frustration on his part, when he saw, in terms of the refugee crisis, how the U.S., the Biden administration, was handling that. He called it inhumane. He's well aware of the conditions in Haiti. One of the things that happened when Foote, came to Haiti, he was appointed 2 weeks after the assassination of the president, and he started talking to people, especially a lot of people in civil society, and they were talking to him about the security issues. And I actually hosted a panel at FIU with him where he talked about the country not being prepared to go to elections because the security, the armed gangs, that was first and foremost the biggest challenge that was facing Haiti today. It was a challenge.
And it's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge that's facing Haiti. Weija, quickly, because we're going to move on to some of the challenges, because there are so many facing President Biden. Title 42, where's it going? And also these Border Patrol horses, they've been using them since 1924. Do we know if they're going to end totally or just temporarily?
So the Secretary of Homeland Security said that that's all under review, because right now that policy is temporarily under hold. After we saw those images, the mounted units are not in Del Rio right now, but that is the question, is whether they'll continue to. As for Title 42, this is exactly why I think the president is under so much fire, because he promised to dismantle what he called inhumane immigration policies left over from the previous administration. Of course, Title 42 is one of the most controversial rules that former President Trump was using to turn migrants away without question, citing a public health emergency without giving them an opportunity to apply for asylum. That's why we're hearing from Democratic leaders, from Democrats, from his supporters, who are asking, why are you still using this? Why aren't you making exceptions for these migrants whenever before you were calling similar practices inhumane and immoral? But they really doubled down today and defended Title 42, citing the deadly pandemic that we are still facing.
Robert, what's the way that the president is handling all these challenges reveal about who he is and the Biden doctrine? When you think about Afghanistan, COVID, there's so many challenges that he's facing. What have we learned about how this president is looking at this presidency?
To understand this moment, we really need to, as reporters, go back to a crossroads he faced early in his presidency. And we document this in the book around February 1st, 2021, when he decided to go big, use reconciliation on that $1.9 trillion rescue plan. This is a president who had decades in the Senate, 8 years as vice president, and he was known as Old Joe, not a reference to his age, but in terms of the old Joe you knew around the Senate, who you could cut a deal with. He made a choice early on in his presidency to go big, to work in lockstep with progressives like Senator Bernie Sanders and others, and that led to the rescue plan passage. And now he's trying to go big once again this fall on another major spending plan. But the question is, can it last? Does he have the political capital to get someone like Senator Manchin to come along? A lot of these moderates, Bob, we've reported on, like Senator Manchin, they're wary of going forward.